What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel.
All right, so against my better judgment, we are gonna go ahead and try to record an audio. Now, I may sound really bad, but I actually feel a whole lot better than I did because, God, I felt like death. Also, I don't know how many of you guys watched UFC 207 last night, but like Amanda Nunes beat the hell out of Ronda Rousey, and there's no two ways about it. Ronda Rousey got her ass kicked. If I were her, I would just disappear. I'd be like, you know what? It's time for me to just go away. Time for me to just go ahead and leave and not be part of UFC anymore. Anyway, so we're covering the first storyline of Titans. Now, this is actually really cool. And this was really just kind of paying homage. I mean, this is really Dan Abnett sitting down and saying, we're going to pay homage to the legacy of the Titans. Because keep in mind, the Titans were designed originally to be this sort of continuation of the original Teen Titans, right? I mean, you had the Teen Titans, which first popped up on the scene, and they were just teenage superheroes, took the world by storm. They were one of DC's highest selling comics at the time. But because of the fact that they were teenagers, you couldn't have, the adult Wally West be on the Teen Titans. It just didn't make any sense. And so after Crisis on Infinite Earths, a lot of things were changed up, new people were added in, roles were switched around, so on and so forth. And so we got the Titans, which gave us the original Teen Titans on their own team. The issue with this was that by the time the New 52 came around, the Titans were basically gone, and the new Teen Titans stories were really nothing to run home about. If you ask any hardcore, Teen Titans fan, they'll tell you New 52 was not that great. It really lacked what they thought made Teen Titans so good. I personally didn't mind it, but I'm not a hardcore Teen Titans fan. So in any event, DC Rebirth was designed for the purpose of basically saying, hey guys, here's all the stuff you loved before the New 52, and we're bringing it back with the New 52. Now, what Dan Abnett does with regards to Wally West, because he's really going to be like the main focus of this, is he basically gives us this kind of a rehash. Now, I have Titans Rebirth down in the description, which you guys are welcome to check out, and that'll give you guys an understanding of what's going on with regards to Wally West at the moment. But as a brief run over, Wally West had essentially just been forgotten by the world. That was really the explanation that was offered as to why he didn't show up when the New 52 first launched. The pre-New 52 Wally West was just absent. Nobody knew where he went to, and all we had was the New 52 version of Wally West. Well, DC came along and they said, well, someone or something had basically made the world forget about who Wally West was. Now, his return came by way of Barry Allen. He literally appeared at Barry Allen. Barry Allen recalled who he was and was able to anchor him back into the present again. Now, from that point, it was really just Wally trying to find his place, trying to find the members of the Titans, which that was the whole basis of Titans Rebirth, was to bring the original Titans all back together again, trying to figure out who it was that made everybody forget about him, and then also trying to figure out what the bigger picture was in terms of why everybody had lost 10 years of their memories. Now, what that means is the Titans comic is largely, or is most likely going to be the place by where we basically get the whole Dr. Manhattan thing, specifically with regards to the way the story ends. But what this does is this initially picks up with Lilith. Now, Lilith Clay is an old school character. I mean, she's really been around for quite some time. The idea, though, was that she was someone that was kind of toyed around with. She always had these powers that dealt with some method of mysticism or telepathy or, telekinesis or, precognition. They always kind of altered over the years. But what DC's doing right now is they're basically taking this Omen concept that was established in the New 52, and they're rolling it over to her in terms of, what it is that she's capable of. But there's also still the idea that her and Omen are two distinctly different characters. It's a really weird situation. Suffice it to say, she basically has the power to read minds at the moment right now. And because of the fact that she's been searching through Wally West's mind, what she does is she asks the question, who's Linda Park? Now, this makes sense because with regards to the character of Linda Park, she was the main love interest of Wally West throughout the entire Mark Waid run and beyond. I mean, once she was introduced and she was basically the person that would go on to become his wife, the two of them had one of the most popular marriages in the history of comic books, especially if you were a Flash fan, because remember, after Crisis on Infinite Earths going into the 2000s, if you were reading Flash, you were reading Wally West. And so because of this, it's really just Dan Abnett saying, hey guys, we're going to be bringing back Linda Park. Linda Park is going to be returning to DC Rebirth in terms of the character that may end up going on to becoming the wife of Wally West. The other half of this, though, is the tumultuous relationship between Wally and Linda leading up to their marriage was a hallmark of Mark Waid's writing. It's one of the reasons why people loved Wally West as a Flash so much, because there was so much character building. Seeing the two of them have their own bumps, seeing the two of them have their own arguments, their own debates, not really getting along in the beginning, the fact that Linda Park really hated Wally West when she first met him, seeing the two of them overcome those obstacles and eventually get married is one of the things that help people to become so attached to Wally West. And so because of that, it's really Dan Abnett saying, hey, you guys are going to be able to experience this journey all over again. You guys are going to be able to see Wally West and Linda Park fall in love for the first time all over again. Now, it's going to be a little bit different this time because one of the main focuses here, and this is actually really kind of interesting, one of the main focuses here is that Wally West had actually ran up on Linda Park when he first came back. After he had finished talking to Barry Allen, he ran up on Linda Park and was like, hey, I love you, girl. Like, we were meant to be together. We had a relationship and everything. And it freaked her out. And so he just took off. And so it's almost like he's been trying to force a situation that really won't work. It has to basically form organically. But in the midst of all this, what the Titans are also trying to do is they're trying to basically track down who it was that had wiped, Wally West from the minds of everybody in the world, presumably. Now, this is actually a really important moment in the comic. This is really significant. And the reason why is because for Roy Harper, one of the major aspects of his character that's kind of been teased on that hasn't really been touched on that much was his former heroin addiction. Back during the days of Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil, when they were writing the Green Arrow series in an effort to revitalize it and to make it more gritty, after the death of Gwen Stacy, the idea was, okay, if superheroes can fail, if Spider-Man can fail to save his love interest, that means that all superheroes can fail catastrophically. If superheroes can fail, their sidekicks can fail. So the question only becomes, how far can they fall? Like how badly can the sidekicks fail in their entirety? The answer was given to us when Speedy became addicted to heroin. Now, the problem with this was that this touched a nerve for a lot of people. I mean, Snowbirds Don't Fly, it was one of those comics that really helped to change everything because now it was not just, well, superheroes fail. Now it's like drugs are a legitimate aspect of comics. Now, it wasn't like they were the first ones to do it. This has been touched on before, but it was the first one to do it in such an extreme way because it was trying to resonate with younger people during the whole era of, drug experimentation in the United States and so on, but also trying to draw attention to how dangerous it can be. The result was that DC kind of remained hands-off of Roy Harper's drug experience for quite some time, and even during Convergence, when they gave us, the old school Roy Harper, they didn't use drug addiction. They never talked about him being addicted to drugs. I don't remember what it was that they said. I don't remember if they said it was something else, but they never said it was heroin addiction. They never used drugs. Maybe it was alcohol, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that just shows you the kind of road they were walking. What he basically tells Donna Troy is, look, these seedy guys that we're interrogating, I know these guys. And the reason I know these guys is because I've been on both sides. I've been a dealer and I've been a user. I've dealt drugs and I've used drugs. And again, that's just Dan Abnett saying, hey, look guys, this is part of Roy Harper's history. This is just part of who he is. It's part of his legacy because remember, this is all pre-New 52 stuff that's being rolled over into the New 52. And so it's, look, he's been a user. This is an important part of his history because it's an important part of DC's history. And so it's good to see, DC kind of coming back and saying, hey, we need to acknowledge the significance of this. Now, the other half of this is that with Lilith continuing to explore the mind of Wally West, because remember, she was basically, going through Wally West's mind while everybody was out trying to trace down leads on who it was that messed everything up. Lilith had actually dug a little too deep, and when she did, she effectively woke up a presence. Now, this presence is revealed to us to be a villain named Abracadabra. Now, Abracadabra, God, that's really Dan Abnett reaching back. And it makes sense too. I'm pretty sure Abracadabra showed up in the 1960s, I think it was. He's an old school villain. He was originally a villain of Kid Flash and Barry Allen. And it makes sense that he would be rolled over into this landscape right now because, if the story is largely focusing on Wally West, then why not grab some of Wally West's older villains? Now, Abracadabra had actually waxed and waned. He changed a little bit. He had, as far as I'm aware, no presence in the New 52. But before the New 52, he originally appeared as a guy from the 64th century who used technology and masked it as magic in order to basically trick people into believing that he was a legitimate sorcerer and magician. Now, this eventually changed in the 1990s, I think, when they basically made him a sorcerer. I think it was like 1995 or something like that. DC was like, yeah, he's a sorcerer now. He actually uses magic. But he was always designed to be a small-time guy. He was always designed to just be a villain of The Flash and, of Barry Allen and Wally West. That was really all he was supposed to be. It was never like he was a great, big, huge, grandiose foe. But with DC Rebirth, Dan Abnett's going back and saying, no, he's not a legitimate sorcerer. He's not an actual guy who, uses magic. He just uses technology disguised as magic. So he's like Mr. Mxyzptlk or Batmite or something like that. He's not from another dimension, but he uses advanced technology that's indecipherable from magic to, if it was used in front of primitive people. But the idea here is, with Abracadabra, he basically conjures up his own version of the Titans. Now, this is why I say this story is really more about paying homage to the Titans than anything else, because it is a cool story. I really like the direction that it's going in, but the versions of the Titans that Abracadabra conjures up are the Titans that he remembers. So we get Wally West in the original Kid Flash costume. We get Donna Troy in her old school costume. The same thing with Robin, you know, the whole 9 yards with Roy Harper. They're all in their classic costumes. And it was just, you know, it was a way for Dan Abnett to say, hey guys, look, there's everything that you remember, everything that you loved about the Titans from back in the day. It's all in this comic. It's like a giant nostalgia trip for old school Titans fans. And so because of this, the battle plays out pretty much the way you would expect, in the sense that they're able to hold their own, they're able to go against each other, but Dan Abnett also keeps in mind the basis behind why it was that the Teen Titans and the Titans were so successful. The Titans and the Teen Titans were never just a team that fought guys. I mean, it was never just like the mini Justice League. I mean, it was to a degree, you know, I mean, well, I guess Young Justice was really more like a mini Justice League, but the reason why the Teen Titans and eventually the Titans were so successful is because of the fact that it dealt with teenage themes, young love, romance, you know, people coming into their own, the angstiness of teenagers, you know, people just don't understand me. They don't understand where I'm coming from. The idea that, you know, that as a child, you know, you expect the world to revolve around you. You expect the world to cater to what it is that you want. But then once you grow into an adult, you realize that you have to adjust yourself to fit the world. The world doesn't change for you. And so because of that, these themes of growing up, these themes of moving away from being children to being adults began to change and began to resonate with people because of the fact that they saw themselves as teenagers. But whatever the reason may be, there was also the idea of people falling in love. And what happens here is, in this conflict, when the Titans are fighting one another, Roy Harper is eventually taken by Donna Troy, by the Donna Troy doppelganger, who uses her lasso of persuasion, which, by the way, I just want to throw it out here. Roy Harper, Arsenal looks badass in this comic. Like, he looks pretty badass. But while he's under the control of the lasso of persuasion, he tells Donna, you know, stop this. And she says, you know, why should I? And he says, because I love you. Now, the cool thing about this is Dan Abnett's not really going to expand on this too much, but, you know, he's more or less being forced to tell the truth here. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice. Because of that, the real Donna Troy overhears what it is that he says, you know, and so in her mind, she's like, oh God, you know, he actually loves me. Now, of course, you know, this leads to these different doppelgangers and so on of Abracadabra are, of course, defeated. I mean, we wouldn't really expect the Titans to lose, but in the aftermath of all this, we end up having Donna Troy basically confront Roy Harper. You know, she basically runs up on him and is like, explain yourself. Now, this is why I say things get really cool, because Roy Harper initially says, no, I was just talking, you know, I was just lying, you know, I just kind of did what I had to do, you know, it didn't really, you know, work on me the way it needed to, you know, that kind of thing. And so he's just lying his ass off to her. Donna Troy is just kind of like, okay, fine. And she says, well, I'm glad you don't love me, and storms off. The way that Dan Abnett writes this, it's people, you know, it's two stubborn individuals. Roy Harper is clearly in love with Donna Troy. Donna Troy is clearly in love with Roy Harper, but the two of them won't admit it to one another. And so for us as the reader, it's just like, okay, when are they going to get their shit together and like say something? Like, when are we going to see Donna Troy and Roy Harper get together? And that's why the Teen Titans and the Titans were so successful, because of that small little tidbit here, you know, that tiny little bit of interaction, those small, you know, goodies that show up, the mortar between the bricks. That's what made the Titans so cool. You can write a story, you can make any comic with any team that just beat people up. I mean, that's not hard to do. It's a super easy thing to do. Developing the characters, creating romance between characters, creating chemistry between characters, that is tough to do. Doing it in a way that's compelling and intriguing is even harder to do. And so, you know, being able to pull that off consistently is why the Titans and the Teen Titans were so successful. Now, at this point, it's really just a matter of Dan Abnett also coming along and tying in themes of the Watchmen, because that's really kind of been the big question here. Of course, you know, we do have Abracadabra with, you know, the Watchmen watch, or it looks like the Watchmen watch with blood on it, you know, the throwback to the death of the comedian from the Watchmen comic, the idea of Dr. Manhattan somehow being involved. You know, a lot of this is kind of left ambiguous, but we also basically have Wally West going back and talking to Linda Park again. Now, technically speaking, he knows he's not supposed to do this just because of the fact that, you know, he needs to keep his distance, because he's just as much a danger to her as anything else, because his suspicions are that if he goes and tracks her down, that because of the fact that she's basically his weak point, that Kadabra will most likely try to kidnap her. But Wally West is willing to take this chance. Now, running up on Linda Park saying, hey, look, you know, I'm sorry that I terrified the absolute hell out of you. You know, it wasn't my intention to scare you. Again, you know, it's Dan Abnett setting the stage. and basically saying, hey, these two are gonna get together. We would expect they would. I mean, it would be like the biggest tease ever if Dan Abnett were like, hey guys, like, wouldn't it be cool if Linda Park and Wally West got back together again? And we were like, yeah, and he's like, well, they're not. And then he just ends it there. Like, that'd be hugely disappointing. But of course, in the middle of his conversation, Abracadabra appears and takes Linda Park away. So of course, this basically gives us a scenario for Wally West to try to save Linda. Now, something else that I'd also like you to keep in mind here is that for the next little bit of this story, everything that we're going to talk about happens in the span, or at least everything that does happen, happens in the span of about 6 seconds. At least I'll tell you when that 6-second window starts, because it's actually really crazy how fast Wally West moves. But what happens here is basically we have Abracadabra, who's essentially kidnapped Linda Park and has effectively taken her to Gotham City, putting her over I think a giant cauldron of fire or something like that. And the idea is to basically have Wally West come and try to save her while also trying to save the other members of the Titans. And so what he does is he grabs his different henchmen and he basically disperses them across while they're all trying to find Linda Park, and then has each of them, held captive. They're all basically taken prisoner. And so what this does is this puts Wally West in a tough spot. The reason why is because when it comes to speedsters, at least as it's being established by Dan Abnett right now in DC Rebirth, if they run faster than the speed of light, they'll merge with the Speed Force. And so what he's trying to do here is essentially just destroy Wally West by doing this. He's basically trying to destroy Wally West by forcing him to merge with the Speed Force. Now, under normal circumstances, we would say, okay, well, why does that matter? I mean, all he would do is just re-emerge from the Speed Force. He would just walk out of the Speed Force and come back like he always did. But what Abracadabra says is, no, that's not going to happen. And the reason why is because much like a ship anchored to port, Linda Park was Wally West's anchor and Wally West was a boat. And so Linda Park was the one that basically kept him from just floating out into the great beyond. But with Linda Park not loving Wally West because she doesn't know him, because she doesn't love him, there's no one to anchor him. And so if he merges with the Speed Force, that ship is just going to sail out into the ocean forever. It'll just go on and on and on and on and on, and there'll be nothing to bring it back. And that's exactly what Abracadabra is shooting for. He's basically making the argument here that because of the fact that Linda Park doesn't love Wally West, he's going to merge with the Speed Force, literally racing around the world trying to save his friends. And when that happens, there's no coming back for him. He's effectively going to be gone forever. And so this is when that 6-second window starts, because basically he ends up running, like traversing all over the place. I mean, he goes everywhere. And the reason why I say that this is so cool is because of the fact that Wally West doesn't care. I mean, he goes from Keystone City to Metropolis, all the way to Gotham City and back again. I mean, it's literally him just running around the world. What he also says is, look, bad things happen when speedsters run super fast, or at least to go from Metropolis to Keystone to Coast City to Gotham City, to run around the entirety of the country in 6 seconds is going to force him to exceed the speed of light. And bad things happen, meaning Wally West knows that he's going to merge with the Speed Force if he keeps running this fast. He knows exactly what's going to happen, but he doesn't care, because for him, his friends will live. His friends will be alive. Abracadabra, on the other hand, basically makes the case in saying that Wally West was the only one who could ever defeat him. Coming from the future, he knows that Wally West will be the one to defeat him. Nobody else will. And so if Wally West is out of the picture, then he'll effectively win. No one else will be able to hold him off. And so because of this, the last step for Wally West is to essentially rescue Linda Park. Now, of course, she's terrified by everything that's been going on, but the last thing she sees of Wally West is sacrifice. It's him saying, look, I had to, Linda. It was you. You're the only thing that matters. And so, even if she had never really believed him before, in the sense that, he said that he was in love with her or they were supposed to be together, she believes him now on some level, because the guy was literally willing to sacrifice his life. And so because of this, in these final moments, Wally merges with the Speed Force. Now, what follows is one of the most beautifully written moments in comic books that I've ever seen, that I've ever read. Dan Abnett, I absolutely love you for this. It's beautifully done. What happens here, and it's essentially just the Titans trying to take out Abracadabra and really just being defeated at every turn. That's really kind of what goes on in the background. But the more important thing here is the conversation that Wally West has with Linda Park and the Speed Force. Because remember, the Speed Force is basically the afterlife for speedsters. And people have been asking me this on Twitter in terms of how the Speed Force works. The way the Speed Force originally worked, I want to go ahead and throw this out there. The way the Speed Force originally worked, it was introduced in Mark Waid's run of The Flash, just as this enigmatic force, enigmatic, energy source out there. Prior to that, it was really just chemicals that Wally West was splashed with, that Barry Allen was splashed with, and it just allowed them to run super fast. The Speed Force didn't exist until Mark Waid created it. Then what Mark Waid said is, well, the Speed Force had always existed. The Speed Force had always been there. Max Mercury was the first one to be able to harness its power, even though he could never actually enter it. He was the first one to be able to tap into it, so to speak, and was basically the first speedster. After that, the different experiments, the different accidents that people had, Wally West being splashed with chemicals, Barry Allen being splashed with chemicals, being struck by lightning, it basically allowed them to tap into the Speed Force. What Jeff Johns did is Jeff Johns came back, wiped the slate clean with all that, and said, no. Barry Allen being splashed with chemicals just allowed him to run super fast. But every time he ran, he generated the Speed Force. The difference is that the Speed Force stretches throughout all space and time. And so it was like a rug bunching up, or it was like blowing up a balloon. The bigger the balloon got, the more it stretched into the past, the present, and the future, to the point that by the time Barry Allen supposedly died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, he basically merged with the Speed Force, which had permeated all existence, the past, present, and the future, in the DC universe. And so because of that, he had essentially gone into his own heaven. That's basically what Jeff Johns said during the Flash Rebirth retconning of the Speed Force. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, because it's basically heaven, if any of you guys have ever seen Star Trek Generations, where they had the ribbon that Sauron was kind of thrown into, that Picard was thrown into, and those guys, that's basically what the Speed Force is in DC Comics. It's this idea that you essentially have your own afterlife. You have your own, existence here where you live in what's effectively heaven. The problem with this is that Wally West doesn't want to leave. And this is really kind of what Abracadabra was counting on. Granted, there was no way for Abracadabra to know what experience Wally West would have in the Speed Force. He was just counting on the fact that there'd be no reason for him to come back to Earth. But with Linda Park, being what he sees here, Linda Park is like, look, I know that you love me, but I'm basically a memory. I'm not real. I'm the Linda Park that you remember before you were wiped from everybody's minds. I'm the Linda Park that you wish the real world Linda Park was like. The one that you were married to, the one that you had a relationship with, the one that you trusted with everything. But what she says is, you can't hold on to these memories. You have to let go of the past. Now, this is like a twofold message from Dan Abnett. It's really kind of Dan Abnett sitting down and saying, hey, look, guys, everything changes. When it comes to comic books, everything changes. Not all changes are great. The importance of change is recognizing that things can change back, that things can go back to the way they used to be. And it's really kind of this reconciliation. I think, maybe I'm putting words in Dan Abnett's mouth. This is kind of what I would like to believe, but I would really think it's some kind of reconciliation that DC sat down and they said, it's Dan Abnett saying, okay, guys, look, DC did New 52, that was change. And it was change you didn't like. And so we can change back. So now we're doing DC Rebirth. And that I think works really, really well because, it's essentially just this kind of overarching theme that everything changes. Everything goes through waxes and wanes. Sometimes what's new and unfamiliar will become familiar and it'll become old as time passes. But sometimes people just don't like that. They don't want what's new. They don't want what's unfamiliar. They want what's old and they want what's familiar because change can be scary. And so, while things have to progress and things have to grow, ultimately for Wally West's character within the confines of the story, he basically has to leave the past behind. He can't hang on what used to be. He has to hang on what is. And so because of this, it really gives him the recognition that his anchor is, at least at this moment right now, is not Linda Park. His anchor are the Titans. His anchor comes in the form of the Titans themselves, that they were willing to sacrifice their lives to make sure he could live. He's willing to sacrifice his life to make sure they live. That love is something that you can't fabricate, you can't make. It's genuine and it's true. And so he effectively has to leave behind the memory of Linda Park. And that's why I say this is one of the most beautifully written moments, because this is a crushing experience for Wally West. But it's also a new beginning because he literally punches through the Speed Force. I mean, he just comes flying out of the Speed Force like a bat out of hell and punches the living hell out of Abracadabra. Of course, he's able to basically, wreak havoc on him and essentially just defeat him, send him flying back into the Speed Force to say, well, you're done now, and that's that, for Abracadabra. And so because of all this, it's Wally West sitting down and saying, okay, look, the Titans are my anchor to reality right now. This is not the Linda Park that I know. This is not the Linda Park that I want her to be, but it's possible. It's possible the two of us could eventually have something that we could get together. The funny thing about this is Linda Park is still mad as hell. Like she's still pissed, because she's like, dude, this has been absolutely insane, all this stuff that's been going on. And so, because of this, like she initially wants to leave him behind. She's like, dude, no. You owe me an interview. All right. Like you told me you do an interview at one point to make up for scaring the hell out of me when you first showed up and said we were supposed to be in love and all that kind of stuff, but it's basically Dan Abnett cracking the door open. Dan Abnett's not saying, hey guys, look, they're going to get together at some point. And, it's basically him saying maybe they will. I mean, there's a good possibility that Wally West and Linda Park will get together. The only way for you to know is to keep reading the Titan stories. But the real Easter egg and the huge drop, this is why, in my mind, this story was written, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it tells some great things. I mean, it has some really, really good stuff. It's like when you sit down and watch Empire Strikes Back. The only reason why anybody ever sits down and watches Empire Strikes Back is because you have that iconic scene where Darth Vader says, Luke Skywalker, I'm your father. Paraphrasing. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father, yada, yada, yada. I'm not James Earl Jones, although I wish I was. But what happens is, when the Titans were fighting against Abracadabra, Lilith was trying to scan his mind as best she can to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And what she says, is that she was only able to decipher one name. She was only able to grasp one name while reading the mind of Abracadabra, and that name was Manhattan, which basically tells us Dr. Manhattan is behind all this, or at least it seems like he's behind all this. He's the man pulling the strings. We don't know for certain. Again, DC's being very hush-hush. They're being very cloak and dagger about Dr. Manhattan's role behind DC Rebirth. We just know that he seems to have a hand in it. Now, we don't know if he's the one that caused it. We don't know if he's the one that's trying to fix it. We don't know exactly how all this works. All we know is that Dr. Manhattan has a role in DC Rebirth. So yeah, with that being said, guys, if you're new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. I promise my videos don't always sound like this. I'm just really nasally because I'm just coming off the flu, and yeah, it's rough. and yeah, so I will catch you all later. Peace.